So I've got here a Lasco pedestal fan, most of which is plastic, but it needs cleaned. May not be able to see down in there, but the blades, once I get this shroud apart, you'll be able to see it. They're pretty dirty, probably a little bit grimy. And what happens is when they get coated like that, then they become inefficient in terms of the air that gets moved out of them. And then also, of course, these little plastic protective shrouds need to be cleaned as well. The beauty with that is that once I have these off, I can actually put them out in the driveway and hose them off. That's the nice thing about being plastic. Blades too, except for what I'm going to do with the blades is clean them with a little bit of Windex. The other thing that you can do is you can mix up a solution of water, kind of soapy water, and just use that, or maybe a water if they're really kind of oily, grimy. You can mix up a kind of a water and vinegar, or maybe just straight white vinegar solution and clean them with that. But I'm just going to use the Windex to do it and clean the base. And then once I have this apart, while I'm in there, I'm also going to lube this with a lube that is appropriate for a fan like this, and I'll show that to you when I get to that point. Alright, the first thing that I need to do is locate around the outer edge of these little tabs. They're little plastic tabs all the way around the outside of this, and what that'll do is allow me to take the front kind of protective shroud off of this. Let's see here if I can show you how this works. The lighting may not be great, but these basically just kind of push in, and then you can kind of peel them apart. Now, I'm not very good at doing things one-handed, but I think you get the basic idea. So once I'll put you up on the tripod. Once I get all those kind of loose and popped out, then that'll come off. And then we'll move on to the next step. So you can see that just kind of comes right off, and next up will be to take these blades off. I don't know if you can see this or not, but on mine, let's see if I can zoom that for you just a little bit so you can see. It tells you which way to turn it to tighten it. So you'll see that this has you turning it left to tighten it. So that's a reverse thread. So you'll turn it right to loosen it. Of course, you'll have to support the fan or hold the fan so that you can loosen it, but it's important to understand that this is a reverse thread. Yeah, probably have to order a new one of those. And now you can see that the fan blades just come right off that. This is keyed, so you probably can't see it from there, but there's a little key, and on the fan there's a little notch in this, and that's kind of what basically allows this spinning shaft to catch on the fan blades and actually spin the blades. You can see here kind of up close what I'm talking about. There's a pretty fair amount of dust on here, and you can't feel it through the recording, but that actually feels a little bit grimy, which is what that dust sticks to. And it just kind of happens. These things get dirty because you're drawing air through it, and of course any dust in the air, dust particles in the air are going to stick to these things. So our job here is to get that cleaned up. Now before I do that, I'm actually going to show you how to take this outside ring off of here as well. There's just a little collar here. Also, it should say this one, it says to loosen it by turning it left. This is not a reverse thread. So that little collar comes off of there, and then this comes off, and this is notched so that there's really only one way for this to go on and off of that. So you really can't mix it up. You can switch it because there's a notch in the bottom as well. Actually, you can't. It's got to go that way. All right. so I've got all of those pieces off. Actually, now all that's left here, let's see if I can get this zoomed in for you, is this little shaft. I'll wipe this down as well because it's kind of grimy. Then what I'll do is I have some oil, and it's just basic 3-in-1 oil. So this is what I'll use to oil that. And this is appropriate to use on fans like these. So, and I'll just take a little bit of that. I'll actually turn the fan on. So this is spinning, this shaft's spinning, and then I'll just drizzle a little bit down into that little area down there, and that will get lube down in there and keep this fan kind of doing what it's supposed to be doing. So that's where we are now. I'll clean the fan blades next, and we'll go on from there. Alright, as I mentioned, I'm just going to clean this with some Windex. I do have a shop towel that I can use to clean it off or wipe off the Windex, or I can use a more of a cloth type towel. I'll see whichever one works best. That's what I'll use. And you want to do both sides, front and backs. See, that's kind of grimy, so it's actually taken all the ammonia power of the Windex to get some of that cut. All right. Blades are clean. Now let's move on to the shroud. I don't know how well you can see that or not in the camera, but that's also pretty dirty and grimy. So let me just kind of rub off. See what I mean? So I can just rub off one little clean spot there, and it kind of gives you an idea. You can also see maybe the just the dust that gets stuck in that grime. So I think what I'm going to do is actually hit this with some Windex to loosen that. Maybe wipe it a little bit with a towel, and then I may or may not take it out and hose it off in the driveway with the garden hose. Actually, again, I don't know if you can tell, but that worked pretty well. I don't know that I'm going to need to hose that off, actually. I feel pretty good about that. So I'm going to kind of brush back over this again, just to give it another wipe down. Oh man, that works actually pretty well with the Windex. I'm pleased with that. So now I'll do the other half. Okay, I can tell you that it's not working quite as well on this side, and I think it's because the holes are a little different size and kind of shape. So I may end up having to spray this one out with a hose. I mean, it's working some, but it's not 100% perfect. But it would be an option for you to just, if you have a plastic thing like I do, just take it out and hit it with a garden hose after you've kind of loosened things up with your Windex or with your soapy water or whatever it is you've chosen to use as a cleaning agent. Yeah, it's working, but it's not quite as quick as the front side was. So let me check the inside. Yeah, it's actually working. And I think the cloth rag actually is kind of helped to grab a lot more of the dust more quickly. Yeah, I think I'm pleased with that. All right, so I mentioned I'm going to lube this up while I'm in here, and so what I've done is I've just plugged this fan in. I can turn it on, and it spins the motor, and spins this shaft. Now you want to be careful. See where these little notch things are, these little keys? You do not want to get your finger in there, because that would be painful. You can hear all kinds of sirens in the background. I don't know if it's coming into the camera or not. But anyways, someone's having an emergency, but not us, fortunately. So I'm going to lube this up. So I'll just use, again, 3-in-1 oil. It's that simple. I'll wipe off the excess. And I think we're ready to reassemble. All right, time for reassembly. We'll begin with the rear or back protection shroud here. Again, I just use Windex. Well, there's a bit of fuzz. I just use Windex to spray that, and then I wipe with a cloth rag, and that seemed to get pretty much all of the dust and grime off of that. So here we go. Remember, that was on mine, at least, it's notched, and so if your fan is the same or maybe even a little bit different, you'll want to just watch to make sure, because sometimes they can only go on one way. On this particular Lasco model, it only goes that way. So now I need to tighten that on there with this little ring, and you'll notice it points, well, you can't probably see that, but it says loosen with an arrow that points that way, so that means tighten is that way. So this is a regular righty-tighty. It is plastic, so you don't want to go crazy and strip it out, but that's on. Next up is the fan blades going back in. Remember I said these are kind of notched. This is not kind of notched, it is notched right here. And that'll line up with the little roll pin that's kind of shoved through this shaft here. And that's really what catches these blades and allows the motor to actually spin them. And now we'll put the tightener on there, and this says, remember, tighten, so it's reverse thread. So I got to, against all of my, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, I'm going to have to go backwards this one time. Again, it's plastic, so don't go crazy or you'll strip that out. And since it's reverse thread, it'll spin the opposite of that, and so it should never loosen. And let's test it. It works. And now, for what might be the hardest part of this job, and that's realigning these little tabs to put the front shroud cover back on. So you'll remember that we had these little holes here, and on this part, I don't know if you can see it or not, there's these little clips that slide into these, and so you just have to line them up and snap them back in. Looks like we got it. So let me plug it back in and we'll test it again. It's surprising actually how much of a difference that makes. That's a pretty good amount of airflow coming through. I should have probably tied some ribbons or something to that before we started and then again afterwards, but that feels good. So there you have it. That's how you clean your blades on your fan. You got to take it all apart, clean it up. You can put it all back together, test it out. I'll actually now clean the rest of the fan as well, the outside of it, and the pedestal, and the body of the fan motor back there and things like that, and get it all cleaned up, and it's ready to go back into service in the house.